So listen, I'm going to do something just a little bit different today. Most of the time when I make these videos, I make them for you. My students, my viewers, whoever you are. Hey, thanks, by the way. But once in a while, I need to make one of these things for myself. Now, when I do this, it's because I've come across something, particularly aggravating, something that's been vexing me, and I need to work my way through it. Therapy by way of YouTube, I guess. And, today is one of those days that I need to work shit out. Now, you're perfectly welcome to stick around, listen in, and glean whatever dubious wisdom I may impart in this soliloquy. But you can also click away. I totally get it. It's all good. So with that, here's the deal. I really struggle with rumination. Rumination is when we fixate and obsess on some painful or upsetting event. It grabs hold of our attention and hijacks our thoughts, looping the scenario over and over in our minds without end. And in so doing, resurfacing all the pain and anguish associated with the event, putting us in a dark, ugly, brooding space. It's like when I get a hurtful email from a student from out of the blue, or my boss castigates me for some infraction that is beyond lame. For the next 3 days, I can't think of anything but. It's as though someone has installed a computer virus in my brain, and now it's hijacking all of my mental bandwidth and propagating itself ceaselessly. So yeah, I really struggle with rumination, ergo this video. Let's start by first understanding rumination. There are actually several types of rumination, but the one that really vexes me the most is post-event rumination. So let's talk about post-event rumination. As the name implies, post-event rumination occurs after you experience a negative or embarrassing event. It involves repeatedly thinking about or replaying the event in your mind, focusing on what happened, why it happened, how it made you feel, and what you could have done differently. It's sort of the old classic, what I should have said was, you analyze the details of what happened, interpret the meanings, and then speculate about how others perceive you, both during and after the event as well. For example, let's say that you're in a meeting and giving some sort of presentation, and for some reason you say something a little, maybe off-center. That's sort of my brand. Maybe you think you're being clever, or maybe you're venting a frustration in a way that's just a little bit south of eloquent. Then, after the meeting or whatever, you go home and you think, oh my holy hell, what was I thinking? And now that's all you're thinking about. Or maybe someone else said something that you can't quite dislodge from your mind. Why did they say that? What did they mean? Is there something I need to look out for? Is something I care about in jeopardy? Now, this is awful. I get it. That's why we're doing this right now. But it actually serves a purpose. This is the mind's way of finding meaning or understanding in what's happened during the event and optimally avoid similar missteps in the future. So yeah, there's something good to this, I guess. So now let's talk about the causes of post-event rumination. There are several theories as to why post-event rumination is able to so completely hijack our minds and turn it into our own personal mental torture device. However, the three that resonate most with me are reactance theory, hostile attribution of intent, and emotional triggering. So let's start with reactance theory. Reactance is an unpleasant motivational arousal, as in an unpleasant feeling such as frustration, anger, or irritation. A feeling that emerges when we experience a threat to our autonomy or freedom to behave as we like. When we experience this unpleasant feeling, we become motivated to restore our freedom, to regain that which we perceive has been taken from us. As a result, we ruminate over the offense and consider how best to respond to restore what was lost. Now let's look at hostile attribution of intent. Hostile attribution of intent is when we interpret another's specific behavior as having, well, a hostile intent, even if the behavior is ambiguous or benign. Put another way, we perceive that someone's behavior is motivated by nefarious intentions. They're out to get me, is the idea. Most of the time they really are out to get me, but that's for another discussion. Finally, we have emotional triggering. Emotional triggering is the activation of a strong emotional response to a catalyst that resonates with our past experiences, insecurities, or emotional traumas. Now, if you don't like the trendy word of triggering, I know I don't, think of it as somebody pushing our buttons. When somebody says or does something that conjures up all the thoughts and feelings associated with something deeply important and personal to us. Okay, so that's what rumination is. Those are the causes. Let's get to the good stuff. How do we break the loop? As we look at how to free ourselves from rumination, I'm going to assume an amalgamation of all three of these theories. While one does not necessarily bring about the other, there's a sizable Venn diagram intersection between the three ideas. Sure, we could parse them out, but for the sake of this video, I'm not gonna. So with that, let's look at what we can do to free ourselves from rumination. First, identify your emotional triggers. I know I don't like the phrase, it's overused, but this is actually pretty important. You see, it's helpful to know where you are especially vulnerable or susceptible to emotional manipulation, whether intended or not. What attitudes, beliefs, or behaviors just really push your buttons and send you off into an almost apoplectic fit. I found this to be a very helpful first step in dislodging the negative thought loop from my psyche. The moment I understand which of my buttons somebody has pushed, the effects of the rumination drop significantly. It's as though recognizing how the person has affected me gives me a new level of control over my response. Next, recognize your hyperarousal responses. That's a pretty cool word. Hyperarousal. Woo-hoo, yeah. Get demonetized, Lon. Hyperarousal is a state of heightened physiological and psychological stress. Hyperarousal responses can include increased alertness, heightened anxiety, elevated heart rate, shallow breathing, all that stuff. In my case, I tend to feel physical tension, especially in my shoulders, my face, and specifically my forehead. Go figure. It's just where I feel it. I also have this sort of red mist of fury slowly building over my mind, and I lose the ability to think clearly. And then there's this unyielding desire to throw down with extreme prejudice and utterly destroy my enemies. Was that too much? Okay, the next thing we want to do is kind of put all of this in perspective. I know this sounds a little cavalier, but sometimes you allow the emotions of the situation to distract you from what really matters. When you feel yourself getting into a boil, step back and ask yourself, do I really care about this? Is this worth my time and energy? How will I feel about this in a week? Will I even think about it again? If asking these questions makes you realize that, well, simply put, you just don't care and that none of this really matters to what's important to you, then you can allow yourself to kind of let go and, well, move on with your life. We can also initiate an intervention routine. That sounds kind of important, doesn't it? An intervention routine? An intervention routine can help you physically and emotionally step away from your thoughts and kind of short-circuit the rumination before it takes over, or at least before it gets out of control. So just to name some of my intervention routines, I kind of repeat a positive mantra over and over. In my case, I often blurt out, marvelous, fantastic, amazing, tremendous, just to get my head right. It's kind of like a positive Tourette's fit. I also like to go out in the backyard and play fetch with the dogs or take them for a walk, maybe work in the yard a little bit or read a book or listen to some of my favorite music. I recommend Roxy Music. Or maybe working on a favorite project, anything to just kind of get my head right and on to something I care about and gives me pleasure. Another thing we can do is write or otherwise record our feelings, kind of like I'm doing right here. Of course, this is vague and ambiguous, but you see what I'm saying. If the negative ruminations are like a computer virus bogging down your processing speed and bandwidth, well, then recording your thoughts and feelings is kind of like isolating the virus onto an external hard drive. You can record it in a journal, or if that's too formal for you and journaling isn't really your jam, you can just write it on a piece of paper, and then to show what you really think of all of this, crumple it up and toss it in the trash. Or take a match to it, right? Back when I fancied myself a writer, I used to take the instigating event as inspiration and write it up in a scene. That was always pretty cathartic. You should also set and maintain time and place boundaries. Set clear boundaries around where and when you do and do not think about certain topics, such as work, school, relationships, and so forth. The idea is to compartmentalize your mental energies so that they're not usurped by rumination. This means you need to give yourself permission to maybe ruminate 30 minutes at this time in this place, but then after that short indulgence, it's time to move on to the next task at hand. If it tries to slip back in, say, no, you'll have time to think about this tomorrow if you like, but right now we're focused on X, Y, or Z. You should also be prepared to just put it in the fuck it bucket. Your peace of mind and stillness is of immeasurable value to you. And at some point, probably sooner rather than later, you may need to just get over it and accept the new reality that, well, the cheese has been moved and there's nothing you can really do about it. In these cases, and Lon, you know what I'm talking about, you need to just give the bastards what they want and walk away. Flip the switch in your head and be done with it. They got what they wanted and you get what you want, which is peace and tranquility back in your life. As you can see, I'm really into peace and tranquility. Finally, channel Sisyphus. For a long time, the Greek myth of Sisyphus had been one of my go-to mental recalibrations. A go-to mental recalibration that I somehow managed to forget. And that was after I wrote a frickin' book about it. Anyway, this mental recalibration is too involved to include here, so I'm going to cover it in my next video. So just know, Lon, when you come back and rewatch this video, one of the best ways to get your head right is to channel Sisyphus. All right, that's all I've got to say about that. Now go off and make some trouble. All right, we'll see you later.